here's the reasons why you should or shouldn't play the new Harry Potter game. This isn't a video of me endorsing any ideas, but simply an explanation while bringing up arguments for both sides and the ethics of the controversy. Let's get into it. To understand this controversy and the arguments behind it, we have to talk about J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is of course the author of the Harry Potter books. I'm sure you guys know who she already is. What's notable here is answering the questions of if she's transphobic or not, since the main reason people don't support the game is her transphobia. I'm going to go over the history of the Rowling controversy and fact check some of the things she said so we can assess if the transphobia claims are valid for the people that are unaware. If you're not interested in this and you just want to see the arguments for each side of the video game, then go to this timestamp on the screen. This starts around 2018 when Rowling liked a tweet that referred to trans women as men in dresses. This got her some pretty bad backlash and a couple of articles, but her team said that was just a mistake. Rowling didn't mean to like the tweet, she just meant to screenshot it for later, supposedly. But maybe this was her dabbling in this ideology for the first time. Rowling has been shown to be pretty left-leaning and progressive. She wasn't conservative by any means before the backlash at least, but in late 2019, all hell broke loose. This was when she came to the defense of a woman named Maya Forstater on Twitter. Maya Forstater is an international development researcher who is gender critical. She wasn't renewed for her job because of transphobic tweets she made and just generally being what many would say is problematic and disruptive. And she went to court. J.K. Rowling made tweets supporting her. Just however you please, she tweeted, call yourself whatever you like. Sleep with any consenting adult who will have you. Live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for saying that sex is real. Hashtag I stand with Maya. Hashtag this is not a drill. Because of this tweet and others, many people have labeled her TERF, which TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. This is basically just someone who excludes trans people from the feminist movement. It's important to note that Forstater lost her case in 2019, and it was affirmed that her gender critical views weren't protected, but she got an appeal in 2021 which she actually won, although they still said that those views aren't supported when discriminating against trans people. And then she went to court again for a case of discrimination for not getting renewed, and she won that case as well. Of course, Rowling followed up her support of Forstater with multiple other tweets and statements, and thankfully for us, J.K. wrote a blog explaining all of her points. One of Rowling's main arguments is that sex is real, which is true. Most people wouldn't argue with this, but applying this to gender doesn't work for obvious reasons. When we talk about transgenderism, which is the movement J.K. Rowling is referring to, and she says, for instance, I'm concerned about the huge explosion in young women wishing to transition and also about the increasing numbers who seem to be detransitioning, returning to their original sex. It seems somewhat disingenuous because we're referring to gender, not sex here. Either she's ignorant or she's confusing the two on purpose to make her argument easier to defend. Or she just made another simple mistake. If you don't believe that sex and gender is different, then here's some sources that support the idea. There's also the problem with J.K. Rowling stating that a huge number of people are regretting their transitioning, which is just false. There's a whole meta-analysis of over 50 studies with 90% of the studies concluding that transitioning is beneficial. And on top of that, trans people detransition for multiple reasons, a lot of it just boiling down to money. She also states that, quote, the current explosion of trans activism is urging a removal of almost all the robust systems through which candidates for sex reassignment were once required to pass. You would be hard pressed to say that trans healthcare is worse now than was back then, or that was even a good thing that was harder to get sex reassignment surgery if you wanted it. After that, she basically just brings up the bathroom debate. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may not be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, and you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That's the simple truth. The problem with this is that even normal bathrooms don't require ID or skin or sex chromosomes, so men who want to sexually abuse women, at least through bathrooms, wouldn't need to transition or even claim they're a woman in the first place. A man doesn't have to claim that he's a woman to get inside of a woman's bathroom and assault them, and assault is already illegal anyway. Statistically, there's no link between public bathrooms and increased assaults. Also, trans people are more likely to be assaulted when they're not in the bathroom of their identity. So if anything, trans people are more at risk here. To recap, the core of JK's arguments revolve around the fact that sex is real, but she makes a number of claims that just aren't statistically correct. If you think trans women hurt biological females, then that's your opinion. But making just false claims that hurt trans people is why she's being called a bigot. Coming off of JK's manifesto, let's get into why you shouldn't play the game. The argument boils down to you just simply shouldn't support someone who's a bad person. If you don't think she's transphobic, then at the very least she spreads spreads misinformation about trans people, which would be detrimental. You'd also have to factor in that she's a billionaire and she's gaining income from purchases of the game. There's also other problematic things people perceive to be in her books, like goblins reflecting geo stereotypes, but let's tackle the first issue. It's bad to support bad people. One of the main counter arguments against this is that Rowling didn't directly contribute to the game. It doesn't really matter if Rowling contributed to the game or not because it's a direct reflection of her work. If you see a Harry Potter game, then naturally you're going to make the connection to Rowling. Even if she did directly work on the game, then what would that change? She's still getting paid either way, and the final product is going to be influenced by what she made. Telling trans people to just not play the game doesn't work either, because if this is a moral issue, then people playing the game are morally wrong, and therefore you probably just shouldn't do it. The argument in itself is that it's morally wrong to play the game, so it's just not that simple. I think an interesting turn would be to look at some tweets describing these arguments so we could break them down. The Actman has been very active in the Hogwarts discussion, at least on Twitter, and this was his reply to a trans activist asking people to not buy the game. By buying this game, you support transphobic values. I say as the metal my cell phone used to record this video is mined by child slave labor. People tend to bring up the argument that it's impossible to have ethical consumption pretty much from anything. Most people watching this video probably use Amazon, and cell phones are no different, but there's a difference between buying a cell phone for necessity and a video game for entertainment. A video game, like I said, is just entertainment. You don't have to buy it. Therefore, you can't really compare these two things ethically. All of this boils down to there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, but we would all agree that some purchases are more unethical than others, if at all. Another line of argument you could use is that J.K. is a billionaire, and billionaires being billionaires is unethical, simply because they're likely profiting from human suffering in some instance, like child labor. For instance, a theme park in Florida theme from the Harry Potter franchise would give out chocolate frogs, but these are unethically sourced in cocoa fields. Although Rowling and Harry Potter fans got Warner Bros. To stop working with that company, we can only imagine other things being unethically sourced that Rowling is benefiting from, like clothing, merchandise, and millions of other products. We're gonna switch gears here and go to the other side of the argument. The main argument here is still the unethical consumption. While in the last section I said that buying some products are more ethical or unethical than others, the problem is that it would be extremely tiring to check if every product you bought was contributing to a bad cause. For instance, let's say you're buying a phone, which is probably the last example of unethical consumption that we used. While yes, buying a phone is necessary with the logic of ethical consumption, you would have to check every brand to see which one is causing the least amount of harm. If ethical consumption is of utmost importance, then whenever you buy anything, a house, food, packages, you'd be morally obligated to check every source and brand to see which one is ethical or not, and that just doesn't seem reasonable to do. Another problem with not buying the game is that J.K. Rowling is a billionaire anyway. Does it make a difference if people buy the game or not? The game existing or not existing likely isn't stopping her from tweeting or achieving any of her goals, so it could be seen as pointless to not buy the game anyway because the outcomes would just be the same. Another issue that people bring up is that trans people in their life told them not to buy the game, so they didn't. So I do think that this is noble. The problem is that we can't decide how right or wrong an action is because of someone else's opinion, even if it's relevant to that person. For instance, what if a trans person told me that playing the game is okay? If you go on Twitter, you could definitely find some of these opinions. Obviously, this is a contradiction, and going solely off of trans people's opinions may not be the way to go in deciding if we should play the game or not. This goes with any group of people. If you ask 1,000 black people if segregation is okay, then I'm sure one of them would say that's fine or we should go back to it, but that doesn't really mean anything. The final point that I'm going to dispute is that playing the game automatically makes you anti-trans. We've seen streamers like Hassan Piker try to play the game while setting up a trans fundraiser, which would have obviously been a positive thing. Other streamers have wanted to play the game and make fun of it. And what about the people that are unaware about all the drama and just want to play a new game? Whatever side you fall on in this discussion, I think it would be fair to say that you should treat people with respect even if you think they're wrong. See ya.